Now, here in France, the debate and reaction to last weekend's Césars, the French equivalent to the Oscars, is ongoing. Several actresses walked out of the awards ceremony in Paris after Roman Polanski won Best Director, and it's reignited the Me Too debate. Well, Brey is a French-American film and TV critic and university lecturer specialising in feminism and gender. And her new book, which translated from the French is The Female Gaze, an On-Screen Revolution, is out now. And she joins me in the studio. Iris, great to have you with us. Let's start then with your book, The Female Gaze. What is the female gaze?
Well, first we have to talk about the male gaze to be able to talk about the female gaze. So the male gaze is a concept that Laura Mulvey defines in 1975 that basically explains that we spectators actually associate our look with the man in the film that is looking at the women as objects, and that we all as a society take pleasure in looking at women as objects. And so the female gaze is a response to that, saying, well, there's another way of looking at women in films that is looking at them as subjects and not so much identifying with them, but sharing their experience, being with them. And it seems very simple, but we realize that most of the films that we see, most of the TV series that we watch are actually producing male gaze. But in my book, what I'm trying to show is that the female gaze has always existed. It's just that these movies and these series sometimes are not shown or seen as much, and that we need to think about the ways that we take pleasure in looking in order to really think about domination in our society.
Okay, now your book's coming out at an interesting time with the controversy here in France over the Césars, the French equivalent of the Oscars, as we said. Polanski won Best Director, a man accused of raping a 13-year-old girl. He's also had 5 other women come forward and accuse him of rape. Won Best Director. On the night, we had actresses walking out in protest. Even the presenter refused to come back on stage. It doesn't look good, does it?
No, it doesn't look good, because the signal that it sends, giving, Best Director, we're actually giving the César to a man and not the movie. So we're celebrating the man and we're not celebrating the movie. And this man has been accused of rape by actually 12 women. So it's becoming problematic, because what signal it sends is that the women that are trying to talk about sexual violences need to be silenced again. And so this is the fracture that we're seeing in France right now. On the one hand, men and women who are trying to think about how we can talk about sexual violence and rape, and on the other hand, men and women that do not want to think about gender or domination in film.
Well, we are seeing this divide, aren't we? Because I wanted to ask you, the board of directors for the Césars was forced to step down because of the public outcry over this. So that seems that may be a step forward. But yet we've got many people, Brigitte Bardot included, defending Polanski, separating the man and the art. What's your take on that?
I think that for some women and men, it's too complicated to think about what Polanski did, because that means looking at somebody else's take and listening to the victims. And when you listen to the victims, then you have to think about what happened to yourself and what part you have in this system that is creating images around women. So my take on this is that it's a very complicated issue, but I think there is an urgency in France to really listen to women and to think about the movies that we're going and watching, and to think about the stories that are being told and what stories aren't being told and what images aren't being shown. And we're really lacking a whole imaginaire, a whole way of looking at the world that is showing it from the perspective of the female protagonist.
Now, with the French Me Too movement has been a lot slower in getting started, really 2 years slower. You're French-American, you've spent a lot of time in the US, you've studied there. What are the differences you see between the two cultures and how they handle this specifically in cinema and film?
Well, I think we have to talk about the word gender that does not exist in French. It's genre, but it doesn't really mean anything, because people have a resistance of thinking of gender as a social construct. So we're still having this debate in France, while in the States this has been accepted a long time ago. So in the States, what we call French theory, but also queer theory, are things that are taught at the universities. But in France, this whole discourse is absent. So it's very difficult to think about things if we don't have the words to talk about them.
Interesting. Okay. And I wanted to ask you, you're part of France's collective 50/50, which is a network of film professionals promoting equality and inclusion. They've done some interesting research about the gender of critics writing reviews on new releases and found that less than 30% are written by women. How much of a difference does this make to the way that we perceive films and films made by women with women?
It makes a huge difference. It doesn't mean that women are going to write differently than men, but the domination is everywhere, and the patriarchy is everywhere. So the fact that women as critics can't write as much, because not only it's less than 30%, but they write less than men, and they also write only about films, certain types of films, you see. So it says something about our culture. And it's also, we really need to think about putting equality everywhere, behind the camera, in the way we write about films, but also in front of our camera. It's a global way of thinking about domination that needs to happen in France right now.
I wanted to ask you about that because in your book you talk about how little the female experience is shown on screen.
Yes.
And I wanted to ask you, what do we do to change that? Is it a matter of having more female directors and producers, or is it broader than that? I mean, men need to be brought on board too, right?
I think it's just, we just need to say that experiences that concern only women are valuable. They have value. Seeing someone having their period, seeing someone being pregnant, seeing someone giving birth, all of these images are actually absent. So we need to have people and directors, male and female, to question why are these things so taboo and why aren't we giving them more space on screen? Because it's essential that we share these experiences, and that what happens to women isn't something that's just, not important, or it needs to be central in order to really change things. We need to make women's experiences as valuable as men's.
Well, it's certainly a subject that's being much discussed here in France. So your book couldn't have come out at a better time. It was very great to have you here. Thank you very much.
Thank you.